Hello friends, welcome to the Edenvale Seventh-day Adventist official YouTube channel. Today we would like to look at the book of Romans chapter 8. And I'm going to be reading from verse number 8. And it says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose." Now, let's start with what the verse is not saying before we get into what it's actually saying. The verse is not saying that all things are good. The verse is not saying that all things work together for everyone. However, it says all things work together for the good to those who love God, number one, who are called according to His purpose. So, in this world that we live in, a world of sin, where man has fallen from the grace of God, we see a lot of trials, we see a lot of sin, danger all around us. And we can testify that all these evils that we see around us are not good. So what does it mean to say that all things work together for the good for those that love God and who are called according to His purpose? Now, if we look at another part in the New Testament, in the book of John, Jesus said these words. He said in John chapter 15, verse 10, "If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love." In other words, Jesus is saying, if you love me, keep my commandments. So those who love God, all things will work together for the good. Those who are called according to His purpose, all things will work together for the good, no matter how challenging those things are. So, one might ask, God's commandments, why is it important for us to keep the commandments of God? Well, simply put, the commandments of God are not for His good or for His benefit or a way of His exercising His power among the human race. No. The commandments are good for us. Even David said this in the book of Psalms. In Psalms chapter 14, verse 8, it says, "I delight to do your will, O my God, and your law is within my heart." So David says, "I am so happy to do your will. I'm so glad to do your will, God, and your law is within my heart." So in other words, David equates the will of God for his life to His law. So if you want to know what is God's purpose for my life, look at His law, look at His commandments, and then you can know what His will is for your life. And if you love God, as Jesus said, you'll keep His commandments and you will abide in His love. Now, coming back to Romans chapter 8, verse 28, that says, "All things work together for the good to those that love God, who are called according to His purpose." And we said that not everything that has happened in our lives is good. And in fact, maybe one can say most of the things that happens in our lives is not good. Because there is no good that you can think would come out of a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job. But to illustrate the practicality of Romans chapter 8, verse 28, I'd like us to look at the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the story of Joseph. It's a wonderful story of Christian perseverance and believing in God. If we look from Genesis chapter 37 to Genesis chapter 50, we read how Joseph was the favorite among his brothers. And because of this favoritism that Joseph's father showed towards him, his other brothers hated him. They hated him to such a point that they plotted to kill him. But they decided not to, but to sell him into slavery, into a foreign land. And he was sold to the Ishmaelites, and he was taken to Egypt, where he was sold into Potiphar's house, who was an officer of Pharaoh. Now, while he was in Potiphar's house, the Bible tells us that the Lord was with Joseph, and everything that Joseph did, God made it prosper. But nevertheless, there came a time where Potiphar's wife began to lust after Joseph. But Joseph refused to sin against God. Joseph loved God, and he kept his commandments, and he abided in the love of God. He refused to lay with Potiphar's wife. And because of this, Potiphar's wife came up with a lie that Joseph tried to force himself upon her. And because of this, Potiphar was angry and threw Joseph in jail. Now, you may say, this was not a good situation. How could God let an innocent man like Joseph suffer in this way? And at this point, no one can say truly, this is things working together for the good for those who love God. No one could say that. Up until a point where two of the prisoners had each a dream. One was a butler, one was a baker. And the butler, Joseph, managed to interpret his dream, and the same goes for the baker. He also interpreted the dream of the baker. And unfortunately, the baker's interpretation was that he would die, and he indeed died. But the butler was restored, but he forgot about Joseph, that he was the one that gave him interpretation of his dream. Up until a time where Pharaoh himself had a dream, and in this dream, no one could give him an interpretation, and then only could the butler remember. At this point, that's where we read that Joseph was taken from the prison into the palace, and he was made a governor of all the land of Egypt. And it so happened that the dream had to do with 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And Joseph was made overseer over all the storehouses of Egypt. And because he was overseer, many people came to Egypt to buy corn. And guess what? Even Joseph's brothers came to buy. Now obviously Joseph's brothers were afraid now to say, now Joseph will take vengeance upon us. But interestingly enough, Joseph didn't. Joseph simply said, fear not. I am in the place of God. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save many people alive. I just paraphrase the verse. But it's a brilliant story, friends, and you should read this story from Genesis chapter 37 to Genesis chapter 50. It seems like it's a lot of chapters, but it's a very, very good story of perseverance and trusting in God. So ultimately, all the things that Joseph went through, God managed to work out something good out of it. And you could have said it was a tragic story, but Joseph remained faithful to God. He never forsook the commandments of God, even though he was in a foreign land. How many times have we seen believers moving to a developed country or a slightly well-off area where there is no relatives or friends that know them, and their character changes? It is almost as if they behaved because of their family and friends, because they feared what their family and friends would think of them. But as soon as they go into a land where they know no one, their character change. Interesting enough, Joseph being in a land of Egypt, his character never changed. He never changed his faith. He remained faithful and true to God. So the question is, friends, are we also going to remain faithful and true to God no matter what the challenges that we are facing? Are we still going to believe that all things work together for the good when we have lost our job, when we have lost our loved one, When we have lost our family and friends, are we still going to believe that all things work together for the good? Joseph stands as a classic example that God is true to his word. He will always watch over his people. All we need to do is abide in his love. And how do we abide in his love? By keeping his commandments, by doing what God's will is for us. Thank you, friends. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Please share our channel to as many people as you can and encourage them to subscribe as well. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.